Officer Daniel Reyes stood 6 feet from the coffin of the man who made him a cop, and his dog would not stop screaming. Rex hit the end of his leash so hard the leather snapped taut against Daniel's wrist. The German Shepherd's amber eyes were locked on the casket, wide and wild. His bark ripping through the cemetery like something desperate was trapped inside his chest. People stepped back. Officers exchanged glances, and Chief Weston's voice cut through the cold March air like a blade. "Get that animal under control, right now." Daniel didn't move, because Rex wasn't grieving. Rex was alerting. And in 3 years, the dog had never once been wrong. Before we go any further, if this is your first time here, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and leave us a like. It means more than you know. Drop the name of your city in the comments right now. I want to see how far this story has traveled.
And stay with us all the way to the end, because what happens next will change the way you think about loyalty, truth, and the ones who never stop fighting for you. The funeral for Sergeant Aaron Cole had been planned with the full weight of department ceremony. Dress uniforms, a folded flag, an honor guard of 8 officers standing rigid in the Tennessee cold. Chief Gary Weston at the podium, voice deep and steady, talking about sacrifice and duty and the kind of courage most men never get to demonstrate. Daniel Reyes stood at the edge of the gathered crowd with Rex leashed at his left side and heard almost none of it. He had been trying for 4 days to believe the story. Cole had gone to investigate a report of suspicious activity at an abandoned warehouse east of town. The building caught fire. The cause was listed as electrical accelerated by stored chemical material. 1 body recovered, identified as Sergeant Aaron Cole by his department badge and the preliminary report from the county medical examiner. 4 days. That was all the time Daniel had been given to absorb the fact that the man who recruited him, trained him, and sat across from him at the diner on Linden Street every Thursday morning for 3 years was gone. He had tried to believe it. Rex hadn't made it easy. From the moment the casket arrived at the funeral home 2 days earlier, the dog had been wrong. Not aggressive. Not confused. Wrong in the specific, focused way that Daniel had learned to read over hundreds of hours of field work. Rex tracked, and Rex alerted, and Rex was never casual about either. When the dog went still and locked his gaze on something, there was always a reason. At the funeral home, Daniel had attributed it to stress. Dogs picked up on human grief. It made sense. At the cemetery, standing 10 feet from the lowering mechanism, as the honor guard prepared for the final salute, Rex stopped being explainable. The growl started low, buried deep in the dog's chest. Daniel felt it before he heard it, a vibration traveling up the leash into his palm. He looked down. Rex's eyes were fixed on the casket. His ears were flat. His tail was straight and rigid. Every muscle in his body had drawn tight. "Easy," Daniel murmured, shifting his grip on the leash. "Easy, boy." Rex turned his head and looked directly at Daniel for 2 full seconds. Then he turned back to the casket, and the growl became a bark. 1 bark, then 2. Then a pattern Daniel recognized like his own heartbeat. 3 short, pause. 3 long, pause. 3 short. Their signal. Their private code built across 1,000 training sessions and real-world deployments. The alert Rex gave specifically for the presence of human remains in a location inconsistent with the reported circumstances. "Cooper," said the officer beside him, using the wrong name, too rattled to correct himself. "Do something." Daniel did nothing. He stood absolutely still and watched his dog. Rex hit the end of the leash at a dead run, tearing the leather through Daniel's grip so fast the friction burned his palm through his glove. The German Shepherd crossed the 10 feet to the casket in under 2 seconds and threw himself against the lid claws, scratching the polished oak, barking in sharp, insistent bursts that shattered every quiet corner of that hilltop cemetery. Chief Weston stepped forward. His voice dropped into the register he used when he wanted immediate compliance. "Officer Reyes, remove your animal from this service. That is a direct order." Daniel still didn't move. Around him he could hear the murmurs spreading through the gathered officers, the shift of feet, the nervous coughs. He heard the priest go silent. He heard someone's radio crackle and cut out. He heard a woman behind him whisper to the man beside her that something was wrong with the dog. She was right, but not in the way she meant. "Rex," Daniel said, his voice quiet and firm. "Here." The dog looked at him, barked twice more at the casket, then turned and took 3 steps toward Daniel and stopped, positioning himself directly between Daniel and the coffin. His body language was unmistakable. "I am not leaving this spot, and neither should you." Daniel looked up at Weston. "Sir, I need to request that we delay the burial pending identification verification." Weston's jaw tightened. "The identification has been verified." The medical examiner filed his report. "This is a funeral, not an investigation." "With respect, sir, my K9 is running a human remains alert on that casket. That is department protocol grounds for secondary confirmation before interment. Your dog is distressed because you are distressed." Weston's voice was even almost kind, the way a man sounds when he has decided how this is going to end and is simply waiting for the other person to catch up. "That's a grieving animal. We have all seen it. Let's honor Aaron Cole with the dignity he earned." A voice came from the edge of the crowd, clear and unhurried. "Officer Reyes." Daniel turned. A woman in a gray coat was walking forward from the outer ring of mourners. Dr. Sarah McAllister. He recognized her from 2 evidence consultations in the past year. Forensic pathologist, county contract. She had processed Cole's body. She had signed the paperwork. Her face was not the face of someone coming to pay respects. It was the face of someone who had been waiting 4 days to say something she didn't know how to say.
She stopped 2 feet from Daniel and kept her voice low enough that only he and the nearest 2 officers could hear. "I processed the remains that arrived labeled as Sergeant Cole. The dental confirmation was submitted after my initial report, not before. That reversed the standard sequence. I flagged it internally. I was told it was a processing delay at the submitting office." Daniel's mouth went dry. "You're saying the dental records came in out of order?" "I'm saying they came in after I had already filed, which means I signed a death certificate that was not fully verified at the time of signing." She held his gaze. "I should have stopped the process. I didn't. That's on me. But I'm telling you now." Rex had stopped barking. He stood beside the casket, completely still, watching Daniel with those amber eyes. Daniel turned to Chief Weston. His voice was steady, each word placed with care.
"Sir, I am formally requesting on the record that this casket be opened before interment under departmental protocol for disputed identification of remains. I am invoking that protocol now." The silence that followed lasted long enough for the wind to move through the bare oak trees twice. "You are making a spectacle of this man's funeral," Weston said. "I am doing my job." Daniel didn't raise his voice. "Sir, if I'm wrong, I will accept every consequence that comes with it. But if Rex is right, then whoever is in that casket is not Aaron Cole. And we are about to bury the evidence." A woman's voice came from beyond the perimeter of officers. "I'll serve as press witness." Every head turned. Elena Voss, 30 years old, leather satchel over one shoulder, recorder already in her coat pocket. Her press credentials were visible on the lanyard around her neck. She had been standing at the outer edge of the gathering the entire time, and her expression carried the specific composure of someone who has been waiting for exactly this moment. Weston's expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes shifted. "Miss Voss," he said, "this is a private departmental service. And I'm a credentialed member of the press observing a public official's funeral on public grounds." She didn't move. "If there's a formal identification dispute being raised, that's newsworthy. And I'm already here." For a long moment, Weston looked at Daniel, then at Rex, then back at Daniel. "Open it," he said quietly to the funeral director. His voice had gone flat in a way that Daniel would think about for a long time afterward. Not angry, not surprised. Flat. The latches clicked. The lid lifted. Daniel stepped forward. The man inside was wearing Aaron Cole's badge. Aaron Cole's uniform. The department's insignia was correct on both shoulders. The boots were polished to regulation standard. But the face was not Aaron Cole's face. The man was older by at least 15 years, heavier through the jaw, with gray at his temples, and a nose that had been broken at some point and healed slightly crooked. Daniel heard Sarah McAllister exhale behind him. He heard Elena Voss's recorder click on. He heard Chief Gary Weston say from somewhere behind him in that same flat voice, "That isn't possible." Rex padded forward, one step, sniffed the face of the man in the casket once and sat down. Calm. Certain. The dog had done exactly what he came here to do. Daniel stared at the face of a stranger wearing his mentor's uniform and felt the cold of that Tennessee morning go all the way through him. Aaron Cole was not in this coffin, which meant Aaron Cole was somewhere else, which meant the story he had been told about the warehouse fire and the electrical fault and the one body recovered was not the story that had actually happened. He straightened slowly and looked at the gathered officers around him, at the faces registering shock and confusion, and something he could not yet name, and he looked at Weston, who was staring at the open casket with his hands clasped behind his back, perfectly still. Rex pressed his shoulder against Daniel's leg. Daniel reached down without looking and rested one hand on the dog's back. "Sir," he said, "I need this scene secured. Nobody leaves until we have forensics on site." Weston didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice had found its authority again. "Agreed." He turned to the officers around him. "Lock it down." But his eyes, when they moved back to Daniel, were not the eyes of a man who had just been shocked. They were the eyes of a man recalculating. Daniel didn't see it yet, but Rex was already looking at the chief, his amber gaze steady and still, the way a dog looks at something it recognized before anyone thought to ask the question. The forensics team arrived within 40 minutes. By then, the cemetery had been transformed into something nobody who attended that morning had prepared for. Yellow tape, radio chatter, officers who had come to say goodbye to a colleague now standing in small clusters, voices low, eyes moving between the open casket and Chief Weston, who had positioned himself near the cemetery gate and was speaking quietly into his phone. Daniel watched him from 20 feet away and said nothing. Sarah McAllister worked quickly, crouching beside the casket with her kit open, her movements precise and unhurried, even as the tension around her climbed. She photographed the stitching along the collar. She photographed the boots. She took a sample from the skin at the base of the neck without explanation, sealed it, labeled it, and stood up. "How long before you have something?" Daniel asked. 12 hours if I push it, 24 if I do it right." She met his eyes. "I'm going to do it right. Tell me one thing now." She hesitated. "The injection mark I noted on my initial exam of the body, I logged it as a possible IV site from emergency response. Standard notation." She paused. "It wasn't from emergency response. The angle is wrong. It was administered from behind at the carotid. Whoever did it knew exactly what they were doing." Daniel kept his face still. "So the man in that casket was killed deliberately." "I'm not saying that on record until I have lab confirmation." Her voice was quiet and direct. "But yes, that is what I am saying." Rex sat at Daniel's feet and looked up at Sarah McAllister with the calm attention of a dog who understood more than he was supposed to. Elena Voss appeared at Daniel's shoulder. She had stayed inside the tape line, which took a certain kind of nerve, given that 3 officers had already asked her to move back. "Can we talk?" she said. "Not here." "Then when?" "I'll find you." She slipped a card into his jacket pocket without another word and walked away before any of the officers near Weston noticed the exchange. Daniel looked back at the gate. Weston had finished his call. He was walking back toward the casket, now composed, his bearing restored to the version of himself that Harperville trusted. The decorated chief, the steady hand, the man who had run this department for 16 years without a serious scandal. "Cooper," he said, using the wrong name again, and this time Daniel was sure it was deliberate, a small signal of how little this situation had rattled him. "I want you in my office at 3 o'clock. We are going to work through what happened here in an orderly fashion." "Of course, sir." Weston nodded and moved away. Rex watched him go, ears forward, body still. "I know," Daniel said quietly to the dog. "I see it too." He didn't go home between the cemetery and 3 o'clock. He drove to a storage unit on the east side of town, the one whose key lived on his personal key ring rather than his department ring, and he stood in front of a gray metal shelf until he found what he was looking for. A hard drive in a padded envelope. Aaron Cole had handed it to him 18 months earlier across the table at the diner on Linden Street and said 4 words: "If I don't come home." Daniel had not asked what that meant. Cole had not explained. They had finished their coffee and paid the check and walked out, and neither of them mentioned it again. Daniel plugged the drive into his personal laptop in the front seat of his car. The files opened in folders organized by date and case number. Cole had been meticulous. 12 months of work documented with the thoroughness of a man who knew that anything he built might need to stand without him. The subject was a company called Vantage Medical Transport, private ambulance services operating contracts across 3 counties, including Harperville. The billing records Cole had compiled showed transport invoices submitted to the county for services that had no corresponding patient records. Ambulances dispatched to addresses that did not exist. Charges approved and paid without audit. The total across 31 months was $4.7 million. Daniel read the figure twice. Then he kept reading. The contract approvals were all signed by the same name: Chief Gary Weston. Every single renewal, every budget amendment, every override of the standard competitive bid process. Weston had been signing off on Vantage contracts for 15 years. Cole had highlighted the first one in red and written a single note in the margin. This is where it started. Daniel sat in his car for 2 full minutes without moving. Rex put his chin on Daniel's forearm. "He knew," Daniel said. Not to the dog, to himself. He knew exactly what was in that casket when they opened it. He drove to the diner on Linden Street because he did not want to go to a location that had cameras connected to the department network, and he called Elena Voss from a corner booth. She picked up before the second ring. "I wondered how long that would take." "You already know about Vantage." A brief silence. "I've been building a file on Vantage for 7 months. Their billing irregularities showed up in a county budget audit that got buried without explanation. I've been following the money since then." Her voice was careful and precise. The voice of someone who had rehearsed this conversation in her head many times. "I have financial disclosure records and corporate registration documents that show Vantage's ownership flows through a holding company in Nashville. That holding company has 2 silent partners." Daniel already knew what she was going to say. "Weston. His name doesn't appear directly. It flows through a real estate LLC registered to his brother-in-law, but the financial timeline matches every contract renewal perfectly." "How solid is your sourcing?" "Solid enough that I've been sitting on this story for 2 months waiting for a second thread to pull. I needed someone inside." She paused. "And then a dog started barking at a coffin this morning." Daniel leaned back. Outside the diner window, 2 kids were arguing over a bicycle on the sidewalk. A completely ordinary Tuesday, in a town where the police chief had apparently been stealing millions of dollars, while a good man was buried in a stranger's coffin. "Cole had a second drive," Daniel said. "An encrypted one. His evidence beyond what he gave me. A retired officer named Pete Garland told me Cole hid it somewhere before he disappeared. He called it insurance. Said he kept it somewhere he always went to think." "Do you know where that is?" Daniel did know. The ridge above the old quarry. Cole had taken him there once on a Sunday afternoon 2 years ago, Just the two of them and Rex walking the trail above the granite face, while Cole talked about the case that had bothered him longest, a missing person from 2019 that never got resolved. He had said the ridge was the only place in Harperville where the radio couldn't reach him, and his own head could get quiet enough to work. "I know where it is," Daniel said. "Then go tonight, before Weston realizes how much you already have." He almost said something else, but his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. 3 words. "My office. Now. Not 3 o'clock. Now." Daniel stared at the message. Weston had moved up the meeting by 4 hours, which meant something had changed in the last 90 minutes. Which meant someone had told the chief something he hadn't known at the cemetery. "I have to go," he said. "Daniel." Elena's voice was sharp. "Be careful what you say in that room. He's going to try to read how much you know." "I know." "Give him less than you have." "I know how this works." "You've never worked it at this level," she said, and she wasn't wrong. Weston's office smelled like old coffee and pine cleaner. The man himself was behind his desk, jacket on posture, easy the way a person looks when they have decided to be very relaxed on purpose. 2 files sat in front of him. One was thin, the other was not. "Sit down, Daniel." "First name." Daniel noted the shift. "I want to be straight with you," Weston said, "because you have been a good officer and you deserve straight talk." He folded his hands on the desk. "What happened this morning was a shock, for all of us. The identification failure at the medical examiner's level is being reviewed as we speak. Someone made a serious procedural error, and we are going to find out who." Daniel nodded, said nothing. "The body in that casket is an unidentified male. We have no matches in state or federal databases yet. It is possible this connects to a larger criminal operation, possibly connected to a case Aaron was running before the fire." Weston's voice was measured and slow, each sentence placed like a stepping stone. "Which means this is now a homicide investigation at the federal level of complexity. Which means I need every officer on my team moving in the same direction." "Of course," Daniel said. "Good." Weston picked up the thin file and slid it across the desk. "I'm placing you on administrative liaison duty while the investigation proceeds. You'll have access to all incoming evidence reports through my office. You'll report directly to me." Daniel opened the file. It was a reassignment order already signed, effective immediately. It pulled him from patrol, from fieldwork, from any independent case access, and it included a secondary order at the bottom of the page. K-9 Unit Rex to be transferred to County Training Facility pending behavioral evaluation following the incident at the Harperville Municipal Cemetery this date. Daniel read it twice. His voice came out completely level. "You're pulling Rex." "Temporarily. The behavioral evaluation is standard protocol after a public incident involving a working K-9. Weston met his eyes. "It protects the dog, and it protects the department." Rex, sitting beside Daniel's chair, turned his head and looked at the chief. Daniel closed the file. He set it back on the desk. He looked at Weston and said with perfect calm, "I understand, sir." He stood. He picked up Rex's leash. He walked to the door. "Daniel," Weston said behind him. He stopped, but didn't turn. "Aaron Cole was my officer for 14 years. Whatever happened, I want the truth as much as you do." The chief's voice was warm, worn, convincingly tired. "Don't do anything that takes you off the board before we get it." Daniel turned his head just enough to answer, "Understood." He walked out of the building through the parking lot and got into his car. Rex jumped in beside him. For a moment, Daniel just sat with both hands on the steering wheel, breathing. Then he reached into the glove compartment and took out the hard drive Cole had given him and held it in his hand. Weston hadn't mentioned the drive, hadn't mentioned Vantage, hadn't mentioned the contracts or the billing records or the holding company in Nashville, which meant one of two things. Either he didn't know Cole had given Daniel a copy of everything, or he did know, and he was waiting to see whether Daniel would show his hand first. Daniel put the drive back in the glove compartment. He looked at Rex. "Tomorrow morning," he said. The ridge. Rex's ears came forward. His amber eyes were steady. Outside the precinct windows, the lights in Weston's office were still on. The chief was still at his desk, still working, still thinking. Daniel pulled out of the lot, slowly drove 2 blocks, and then his phone buzzed again. It was Sarah McAllister. 1 line of text. Preliminary talks on the unknown body. Sedative compound carotid injection, same class as the paralytic used in 3 unsolved county homicides from 2019 and 2021. Call me. Do not call from a department line. Daniel read it once. Then he deleted the message and kept driving and did not let himself think about what it meant until he was far enough from the precinct that no one who worked there could see his face. He called Sarah McAllister from a gas station payphone 4 miles outside of town, because there were still payphones in Harperville. And until this week, Daniel had considered that a quaint detail about a place that moved slowly. Now he considered it a lifeline. She picked up on the first ring. "The compound is called dexamethasine chloride," she said. No greeting, no preamble. "It is not commercially available. It does not appear in any pharmacy database in this state. It is synthesized, which means whoever used it had access to a private lab or a very specific black market supply chain." Her voice was controlled, but underneath it was something tight. The same compound signature appeared in 2 homicide cases from 2019 and 1 from 2021. All 3 were ruled accidental deaths at the time. All 3 involved individuals who had some connection to county contracting disputes. Daniel's hand tightened on the receiver. Those cases were closed. They were closed because the talk screens didn't catch it the first time. The compound breaks down quickly. You only find the signature if you know what to look for and you run the right panel within a specific window. She paused. "I ran the right panel." "Who worked those 3 cases originally?" Silence for 3 seconds. The lead investigator on all 3 was Sergeant Aaron Cole. Daniel stood completely still. "He would have known," Sarah said quietly. "If he was the lead, he would have eventually recognized the pattern. Maybe not immediately, but over time, reviewing old files, he would have seen it. Which means when he started investigating Vantage, he wasn't just following money. He was following murders," she said, "and the people responsible knew he had figured it out." Daniel thanked her and hung up. He stood beside his car in the cold for a moment, with his hand still on the phone. Rex pressed his nose against the passenger window from inside the car, leaving a small fog circle on the glass. Daniel got back in the car and drove home, and did not sleep. He was at the ridge trailhead before sunrise. The trail above the old quarry was narrow and steep, and the ground was still frozen from the last cold snap, every step crackling under his boots. Rex moved ahead of him, leash-extended nose sweeping low across the ground in the focused back-and-forth pattern that meant he had a scent and was sorting it. Cole's jacket had been in Daniel's storage unit. He had held it to Rex's nose for 30 seconds at the car. The dog had taken it in with the complete attention he gave everything that mattered, and then turned toward the trail without hesitation. 20 minutes up, Rex stopped. His tail went rigid. He barked once, short and sharp, and turned left off the main trail toward a section of the hillside that backed up against the old quarry infrastructure, rusted ventilation housing, and concrete posts and chain-link fencing that had been installed decades ago and forgotten by everyone except the county maintenance budget. Rex barked again. He pawed at the ground near one of the ventilation shaft housings. The shaft itself was sealed with a padlock that was noticeably newer than everything around it. The metal was clean. The shackle had no rust. Someone had been here recently. Daniel crouched and examined the lock without touching it. His mind ran through what it meant for 30 seconds, and then he stopped analyzing and made the decision and took the bolt cutters from his pack. The padlock gave on the second attempt. He pulled the cover plate back, and looked down into the dark. "Hello?" His voice dropped into the shaft and came back to him as a flat echo. Then from below, something moved. Not something. Someone. "Down here." The voice was weak, barely carrying, but Daniel recognized it the way you recognize a voice you have been hearing in your head for 4 days, hoping you were wrong about what its absence meant. Aaron Cole was alive. Daniel got him out in pieces, essentially bracing Cole's weight against the shaft wall, talking him through each movement. Rex leaning over the opening above, with a low, anxious whine that didn't stop until Cole's hand broke the surface, and Daniel grabbed his wrist and pulled. Cole came up into the cold morning air and immediately folded forward, coughing, and Daniel caught him with both arms and held him upright, while the coughing worked through him. Rex pressed against Cole's side tail, moving in the careful wag of a dog that understood the person in front of him was fragile. "Easy," Daniel said. "Take your time." Cole's face was gray and hollow. His left arm showed the bruising pattern of IV access multiple insertion sites over several days. His lips were cracked. When he finally straightened enough to speak clearly, the first thing he said was, "Weston." "I know," Daniel said. "He was there, at the warehouse. He didn't pull the trigger himself. He had 2 men from outside the county. But he was there." Cole's voice steadied as he spoke, anger doing what calories couldn't. "They injected me before the fire. I woke up down there. There was an IV-lined food water, just enough to keep me functional." His jaw tightened. "They needed me alive. Because of the drive. The encrypted drive. Everything I had on Vantage on the contracts on the 3 homicides, it's all on that drive. But it requires biometric confirmation to decrypt. My thumbprint and a spoken passphrase." He met Daniel's eyes. "They couldn't get into it without me, so they kept me breathing." Daniel looked at Rex, who was still pressed against Cole's side. "Where is the drive?" Cole's expression shifted into something that was almost despite everything wry. "I swallowed it." Daniel blinked. "Before they took me. I had maybe 30 seconds when I realized what was happening. The drive was on my desk. I wrapped it in the emergency capsule from my kit and I swallowed it." He tapped his sternum. "It's still in there. A medical extraction will get it out intact." "Sarah McAllister," Daniel said immediately. "Yes, but not through official channels. If you call dispatch, it goes through Weston. If you call the hospital main line, it gets logged." Cole gripped Daniel's arm. "You cannot let Weston know I'm out until that drive is in federal hands. The moment he knows I'm alive and talking, everything accelerates. He will burn whatever he hasn't burned yet, and he will come after both of us." Daniel was already pulling out his personal cell, scrolling to Sarah's number. He held the phone to his ear and watched Cole's face while it rang, watching the older man breathe, watching the color slowly edge back into his skin, watching Rex stay glued to his side with the devotion of an animal that had never once stopped believing his partner was somewhere to be found. Sarah answered. "Tell me something good." "I need you at the hospital service entrance. Personal access codes, only, nothing logged. I have a patient who needs a medical retrieval procedure and I need it done without touching the official system." A pause. "How serious?" "The patient is Aaron Cole." The silence that followed lasted exactly 4 seconds. Then Sarah said, "Give me 20 minutes." Daniel got Cole to the car with Rex walking on his other side, close enough that Cole could rest a hand on the dog's back if he needed to. Halfway down the trail, Cole stopped and turned to look at the ventilation shaft behind them. 11 days, he said mostly to himself. "You knew we'd find you." Cole looked at him. "I knew Rex would find me." He looked down at the dog. "I kept telling myself that. Down there in the dark. I kept thinking Rex knows my scent better than anyone alive. If Daniel gives him the trail, he'll find it." He exhaled. "Sounds crazy." "It doesn't sound crazy to me," Daniel said. They kept moving. Sarah was at the service entrance when they arrived. She took one look at Cole, assessed him with the rapid clinical scan of someone who had been doing this work for a decade, and said, "Get him inside." The procedure took 40 minutes. Daniel sat in the corridor outside with Rex at his feet and ran through every piece of what he now knew, building the architecture of it in his head. The billing fraud, the 3 homicides, the 15-year contract trail, Cole's testimony, the compound in the unknown body's tox screen, the padlock on the ventilation shaft that someone had installed recently, someone who had access to the location and the means and the reason. Rex lifted his head. His ears came forward. His body went still in that specific way, not the alert he gave for remains, not the signal for the passphrase. This was different. This was the posture he took when something in the immediate environment had changed, and he didn't yet know whether the change was a threat. Daniel looked toward the parking lot through the corridor window. A dark sedan was idling at the far end of the lot. Engine running. No movement inside that he could see. It sat there for 30 seconds. Then 40. Then it pulled away slowly without hurry, the way a car moves when the driver has already seen what he came to see. Daniel was on his feet before the car cleared the lot exit. He moved to the window and tracked it until it turned out of sight. Tennessee plates. He had caught 3 of the 6 digits. "Someone knows we're here," he said. Rex was standing now, watching the same window, body coiled. Sarah came out of the procedure room, pulling off her gloves. "Drive is intact. Clean retrieval." She held up a sealed specimen bag. Inside was a small metal capsule, no bigger than a vitamin, and inside that Cole's insurance policy. "Aaron is stable. He's asking for you." Daniel took the sealed bag and looked at it. Everything Weston had tried to bury for 15 years was sitting in his palm. Cole was propped up on the procedure table when Daniel came in, still pale but alert, his eyes clear in a way they hadn't been on the ridge. Rex went straight to him and put his chin on the edge of the table. Cole's hand moved automatically to the dog's head. "The sedan in the lot," Daniel said. "Someone made us." Cole nodded slowly. "Then we have less time than I hoped. How do we decrypt the drive?" "I do the biometric here. You get the file to Elena Voss and to the federal field office in Nashville simultaneously. The moment it's in 2 sets of hands outside this county, Weston can't stop it." Cole looked at him steadily. "But you have to move tonight. Not tomorrow. Tonight." Daniel looked at the sealed bag in his hand, then at Cole, then at Rex, who was watching both of them with those amber eyes that had started this whole thing at a cemetery 48 hours ago by refusing to accept a lie that everyone else had been prepared to believe. "Tonight," Daniel said. Cole put his thumb to the capsule reader. The confirmation light turned green, and somewhere across town in an office with the lights still burning, Gary Weston picked up his phone and made a call he had been dreading for 11 days. The decryption took 11 minutes. Cole sat with his back against the procedure table, thumb pressed to the reader voice, steady as he spoke the passphrase into Daniel's phone recorder. The green confirmation light held. The files opened in layers, folder after folder, each one a year of work that Aaron Cole had built in silence, while the man above him signed the checks that funded the operation Cole was trying to dismantle. Daniel scrolled through it on Sarah's laptop with his jaw locked tight. Financial transfers, contract approval chains, communication logs between Weston and the Nashville Holding Company, billing records with no corresponding patient files, and at the bottom of the deepest folder, 3 case files. The 2019 homicide, the 2 from 2021. Cole's original notes cross-referenced with the compound analysis he had commissioned privately after the official tox screens came back clean. Every thread led to the same place. Every signature, every approval, every covered track. Gary Weston had not made one corrupt decision 15 years ago and gotten trapped. He had built this deliberately layer by layer, year by year, using the authority of his badge as the foundation and the goodwill of an entire town as the walls. "How do we get this out?" Daniel asked. Cole answered without hesitation. "Elena Voss gets one copy. The FBI field office in Nashville gets another. Both simultaneously. The moment it's in 2 sets of hands outside this county, Weston cannot contain it." He looked at Daniel. "Do you trust her?" "She's been sitting on the Vantage story for 7 months, waiting for exactly this. She could have published with half of what she had. She didn't." Daniel met Cole's eyes. "Yeah, I trust her." "Then move. Right now. Don't go back to your apartment. Don't use your department radio. Don't contact anyone inside that building." Cole grabbed Daniel's wrist, his grip stronger than it had any right to be given the past 11 days. "He's going to find out I'm alive. Maybe tonight. Maybe in an hour. When he does, he will not wait." Rex put his paw on Cole's knee. Cole looked down at the dog, and something moved across his face that had nothing to do with fear or strategy. His hand dropped to Rex's head. "Good boy," he said quietly. "You stubborn, beautiful dog." Daniel copied the files to 2 separate encrypted drives, one for Elena and one for the federal contact Cole gave him, an agent named Patricia Hale at the Nashville field office, who had apparently been building a parallel case on Vantage's interstate billing fraud for the past 4 months, without knowing what was underneath it. He called Elena from the hospital corridor. She picked up on the first ring. "I have the drive contents," he said. "All of it. Cole is alive, and he's talking." The silence on her end lasted exactly 2 seconds. "Tell me where." "Not yet. I need you to be ready to publish the moment I hand you the files. Not tomorrow morning. Tonight. The moment you have it." "I've been ready for 7 months," she said. He called Agent Hale next. The conversation was shorter and colder and more precise, the way federal conversations always were. But when he finished laying out what the drive contained, Hale said, "I'm sending 2 agents to Harperville tonight. Where do you want them?" Daniel named the county road junction 3 miles north of the hospital, neutral ground, far enough from the department that Weston's people wouldn't have a reason to be there. He went back into the procedure room and told Cole the plan. Cole nodded slowly. "Good. Now get me out of this building." Sarah arranged a transport through the hospital's non-emergency patient transfer system, a plain white van with no department markings logged as a routine discharge to a private address. She walked beside the gurney herself, moving quickly through the lower corridor, Rex trotting at Daniel's side. They were 20 feet from the loading bay door when it opened from the outside. 2 officers stepped in. Harperville uniforms, both young, both looking slightly confused, the specific confusion of men who have been given orders they don't fully understand. The taller one, a kid named Garrett, who Daniel had trained with briefly 2 years ago, held up one hand. "Officer Reyes, Chief Weston has requested that you come in for a situation briefing. He's been trying to reach you." Daniel kept his voice completely calm. "Tell the chief I'll be there within the hour. I've got a patient transfer in progress." Garrett's eyes moved to the gurney. To Cole. The recognition hit his face slowly the way it does when you see someone you were told was dead. His mouth opened. "That's," he started. "A patient," Daniel said firmly. "Under my protection. Stand aside, Garrett." The second officer's hand moved toward his radio. Rex stepped forward. He didn't bark. He didn't lunge. He simply moved between the 2 officers and the gurney, and stood there, amber eyes, level body positioned with the absolute certainty of a dog that had already decided how this was going to go. The second officer froze. Garrett looked at Daniel, then at Cole, then at Rex. Something worked through his expression, doubt layered on top of duty, layered on top of the dawning, uncomfortable sense that the order he had been given and the thing happening in front of him were not pointing in the same direction. "I can't let you leave," he said, but his voice had lost its authority. "Garrett." Daniel looked directly at him. "Do you remember what Cole told you at your field training evaluation? The thing he said about your instincts?" Garrett blinked. He said, "Trust what you observe before you trust what you're told." "Observe what's in front of you right now," Daniel said quietly. "Then make your decision." 10 seconds passed. Garrett stepped back. The second officer followed his lead. Daniel moved the gurney through the door. Outside, the cold hit all of them at once. Sarah helped transfer Cole into the back of the van. Rex jumped in without being told and positioned himself beside Cole's legs with the calm permanence of a dog who had located his person and was not leaving again. Daniel climbed into the driver's seat. His radio crackled. Weston's voice came through. No longer warm, no longer measured, stripped down to something hard and direct. "Cooper, I know where you are. Bring Cole in and we talk through this. That's the only version of tonight that ends well for you." Daniel looked at the radio. He looked at the road ahead. He turned the radio off. He drove. Elena met him at the junction of Route 7 and the Old Mill Access Road. She was out of her car before he had fully stopped Satchel over her shoulder, and when Daniel handed her the drive, she held it for one moment with both hands like it was something irreplaceable, which it was. "Everything is on there," he said. "Cole's testimony, the financial chain, the compound analysis, the 3 homicide connections. All of it." "I'll have the story live within 90 minutes, she said. "Once it's published, it's everywhere. He can't pull it back." "He's going to try to move before you publish. He knows I'm running." Elena looked at him steadily. "Then I'll publish in 60. Agent Hale's 2 agents arrived at the junction 8 minutes later. They were efficient and quiet, and they took the second drive and the chain of custody documentation without theatrics. The taller agent, who introduced himself only as Marsh, looked at Cole through the van window and said, "Sir, we're going to need a full debrief as soon as you're medically cleared." "I've been waiting 11 days to give it," Cole said. Marsh nodded. "We'll escort you to a federal medical facility. You'll be safe there." Daniel stood beside the van while the transfer was arranged. Rex had come out and was sitting at his feet, and Daniel's hand found the dog's head without thinking, the automatic gesture of a man whose hands know where they belong. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. 1 sentence. "He's not coming to find Cole. He's coming to find you." Daniel read it twice. Then he looked up. His car was parked on the shoulder 20 meters back. In the rear-view mirror, he could see the glow of approaching headlights on the county road. One vehicle, moving fast and then slowing as it approached the junction. Weston's personal truck pulled to a stop 30 feet away. The chief stepped out alone. He was in civilian clothes, no jacket despite the cold, and he was not in the posture of a man who had come to negotiate. His weapon was holstered, but his hand was close to it. He looked at Daniel. He looked at the federal agents. He looked at the van where Cole was visible through the side window. And then something crossed his face that Daniel had never seen there before in 16 years of watching this man command a room. It was the look of a person watching the last door close. "Gary," Daniel said. He used the first name deliberately, the way Weston had used his. "It's over." Weston didn't move. "You have no idea what you've pulled apart." "I know exactly what I've pulled apart. So does Aaron. So does every person who got a copy of that drive in the last 40 minutes. Weston's jaw tightened. "This department will not survive what you've done tonight." "You almost killed a man to protect a fraud," Daniel said. "You killed 3 others to protect the pattern. And you stood at Aaron Cole's funeral this morning and gave a speech about sacrifice." His voice stayed even, but beneath it was something that had been building for 4 days and had nowhere left to go. "The department will survive the truth. The department doesn't survive you." Weston's hand moved toward his holster. Rex was already moving. The dog covered the distance in under 2 seconds, hitting Weston's arm at full speed before the weapon cleared the holster. The gun went sideways into the gravel. Weston stumbled, struck out with his free hand, caught Rex across the shoulder. Rex absorbed the blow and drove forward, teeth closing on Weston's wrist with the controlled, focused grip of a dog, that had been trained to stop a threat and not a gram of force beyond it. Weston went to his knees. Daniel was there in the next second. He had Weston's hands behind his back before the chief stopped struggling, and when the cuffs clicked closed, the sound was so ordinary, so mechanical, so completely unremarkable for such an enormous moment that it almost seemed wrong. Agent Marsh stepped forward. "We've got him." Daniel stood back. His breath came out in a long, slow cloud in the cold air. Weston was on his knees in the gravel of a county road junction at 10:47 at night. A man who had run a department for 16 years, who had shaken the hands of mayors and senators and parents of officers he had sent to their deaths, and he looked suddenly and completely like what he had always been underneath the uniform. Just a man who had made a choice and kept making it until the choice ran out. Rex came back to Daniel's side. There was a cut above the dog's shoulder from Weston's hand. Not deep. Rex did not appear to notice it. He leaned against Daniel's leg and looked up with those amber eyes. Daniel crouched down. He put both hands on the dog's face. "You started this," he said softly. "At that cemetery. You were the only one in that whole crowd who already knew." Rex wagged his tail once. From the van, Cole's voice came through the open side door, rough and quiet and completely certain. "That's my dog," he said. "Best partner I ever trained." Daniel looked back at the van at Cole's face visible in the opening. Then at the federal agents loading Weston into their vehicle. Then at his phone, which was showing 3 missed calls from Elena Voss and a single text sent 1 minute ago. 2 words. Stories live. The story went live at 11:14 that night. By midnight, it had been picked up by 7 regional outlets. By 2 in the morning, 3 national networks had requested comment from the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. By sunrise, the Harperville Police Department had federal agents in every hallway, and the name Gary Weston was trending in ways that a man who had spent 16 years building careful silence could never have predicted and could no longer stop. Daniel heard none of it. He was asleep in a chair beside Aaron Cole's bed at the federal medical facility outside Nashville. One hand hanging down where Rex had fallen asleep against his leg on the floor, and for 6 hours the world moved without him, and he did not notice. He woke to Cole's voice. "Your dog snores." Daniel sat up. Cole was propped against the pillows, color genuinely returning now, the grayness of 11 days underground, replaced by something that looked like the beginning of himself again. His eyes were clear. His voice was steady, and he was looking at Daniel with the expression of a man who had spent 11 days in the dark rehearsing what he would say when this moment arrived. "How are you feeling?" Daniel asked. "Like I got kidnapped, drugged, and stuffed in a ventilation shaft for a week and a half." Cole paused. "Better than yesterday. Not as good as I'm going to be next month." He looked at Rex. The dog had lifted his head at the sound of Cole's voice and was watching him with those amber eyes. "Come here," Cole said quietly. Rex stood, walked to the side of the bed, and put his chin on the mattress. Cole's hand came down on the dog's head and stayed there. "I kept thinking about him," Cole said. "Down there. I kept thinking if anyone finds me, it's going to be because of Rex. I just had to stay alive long enough for that to happen." His voice didn't break, but it came close. 11 days is a long time to bet your life on a dog's nose." "He found you in under 20 minutes, Daniel said. Cole smiled. It was the first real smile Daniel had seen on his face since before any of this started. Of course he did. Agent Hale arrived at 8 that morning with 2 members of her team and a recorder and a legal pad covered in preliminary questions. She was thorough and unhurried, and she started at the beginning, which meant Cole talked for almost 3 hours. Daniel sat outside in the corridor with Rex and a cup of bad coffee, and listened to the sound of the door being closed on everything Weston had built. At 11, Hale came out and sat down beside Daniel. 16 active warrants issued this morning, she said. Weston, the 2 outside contractors, 4 Vantage executives, and 9 individuals connected to the billing network across 3 counties. The Nashville holding company is frozen. She looked at her legal pad. The 3 homicide cases from 2019 and 2021 are being reopened as federal murder investigations. The families will be notified today. Daniel thought about those 3 families. About the phone calls they had received years ago, telling them their loved ones had died accidentally. About the space those words had occupied in their lives ever since all that grief built on a foundation of deliberate lies. "Will they get justice?" he asked. Hale looked at him directly. "We will do everything within our power to make sure they do." She paused. "That's not a guarantee, but it's the most honest thing I can tell you." He appreciated the honesty. She stood to leave, then turned back. "You took significant personal risk in not reporting Cole's location through official channels last night. The decision to bypass department communication could have created legal complications." "I know. It also almost certainly saved Cole's life and preserved the integrity of the entire evidence chain." She met his eyes. "So while I am noting that it was irregular, I am not pursuing it further. We're good," Daniel said. She left. Rex looked up from the floor. Daniel reached down and scratched behind the dog's ear. "We're good," he said again, quieter this time, to both of them. The news cycle that followed was relentless in the way that only stories combining corruption, a buried survivor, and a canine hero could sustain. Elena Voss's piece ran in the Ledger at 11:14 and was syndicated nationally by morning, her sourcing airtight, her narrative precise, every claim backed by documentation from Cole's drive. She was careful, and she was thorough, and she did not sensationalize a single word, because she did not have to. The facts were enough. The headline above her story read, "Harperville Chief Operated 16-Year Fraud Ring, while Officer he tried to kill remained alive underground." The subheading, which was the line that people quoted, most read, "A K9 named Rex knew before anyone asked the right question." Rex did not read it. He ate his food and slept near Daniel's feet, and accepted attention from the federal facility staff with the dignified tolerance of a dog who considered human admiration pleasant, but not particularly interesting. 3 weeks later, the county board held a formal session at the courthouse. Cole attended in his reinstated uniform, moving carefully but standing straight. Daniel stood beside him. Sarah McAllister sat in the 3rd row. Elena Voss was in the back with her notebook, because Elena Voss was always in the back with her notebook. The board chair read a formal statement acknowledging the department's failure of oversight and announcing a complete structural review of all county contracting processes going back 20 years. It was the kind of language that institutions use when they are trying to absorb an enormous accountability without collapsing under its weight. Daniel listened to it and thought about what Cole had said in the federal facility, that institutions don't reform themselves. People inside them decide to, and that the decision is always made by one person at a time. Then the board chair set down the statement and picked up a different document. "This board hereby formally commends Officer Daniel Reyes for conduct above and beyond the requirements of duty during the events of the past month. Effective immediately, Officer Reyes is promoted to the rank of sergeant." Cole started clapping first. The sound in that room built slowly and then completely, the way applause does when it is genuine rather than obligatory. Daniel did not particularly want the promotion. He had said so to Cole 2 days earlier in the hospital, and Cole had said, "I know. Take it anyway. The next person who needs someone to stand between them and a chief like Weston deserves you in that rank when it happens." And that had been enough. The second commendation was for Rex. The board chair read it carefully with the slightly uncertain dignity of a person who had never before read a formal citation addressed to a dog. It acknowledged Rex's role in the identification dispute at the cemetery, his tracking work on the ridge, his intervention at the county road junction, and his 11-day maintenance of the evidence trail by simply being the dog he had always been. The citation concluded with a line that Elena later told Daniel she was fairly sure was the first of its kind in county history. In recognition of extraordinary service performed through instinct loyalty and a refusal to accept what was false, The Harperville County Board hereby designates Rex as the department's first ever K-9 officer of record. Rex received this honor by sitting at Daniel's side and wagging his tail twice. Then he looked out at the room full of people with the calm, interested expression of a dog who was pleased that everyone seemed to be in a good mood. Cole leaned toward Daniel and said quietly, "He looks like he's already over it." "He was over it the moment we found you," Daniel said. "That was the whole point." After the session, the three of them walked out together. Cole and Daniel side by side, Rex slightly ahead, as he always was, setting the pace, leading the way. Elena caught up with them on the courthouse steps. "I have one more question," she said to Daniel, "for the follow-up piece." "Of course you do." "At the cemetery, when Rex started alerting and Weston told you to control your dog, for a second you hesitated. What were you thinking in that second?" Daniel considered the question the way he considered all honest questions, slowly, and without trying to make the answer sound better than it was. "I was thinking that I was 25 years old and standing in front of my chief at a funeral and about to call him wrong in front of the entire department." He paused. "And then I looked at Rex, and the dog was telling me something that he had never once told me wrong in 3 years. And I thought, if I have to choose between trusting my rank and trusting my partner, that's not actually a hard choice." Elena wrote it down. Cole put a hand on Daniel's shoulder for a moment, as they walked, the brief, solid gesture of a man saying without words what years of partnership had already established between them. Rex moved ahead on the path, ears up, tail, in its easy working rhythm. Amber eyes already scanning the next 100 yards. The way he always did, because Rex did not stop working, simply because a particular crisis had ended. There was always something worth watching, always something worth knowing, always a reason to keep the nose low and the attention honest. The world that had tried to bury Aaron Cole and silence what he knew had not counted on the one variable it could not control. Not the journalist with 7 months of files. Not the forensic pathologist with a conscience. Not the young officer who had learned to trust the right things. All of those mattered. All of those made the difference. But it had started with a dog at a coffin who would not stop barking until someone finally listened. And that was the whole truth of it. The kind of truth that doesn't need a press release or a formal citation or a national headline. It only needs one person paying attention to a loyalty that cannot be bought, cannot be corrupted, and cannot be made to stand down when it knows something is wrong. Rex knew. Rex waited. And Rex was right. Some forms of justice arrive in courtrooms. Others arrive in the dark before sunrise at the end of a trail that only one set of instincts could have followed. Both kinds are real. Both kinds matter. But only one of them started with a heartbeat under a dog's paw and a handler who chose to trust it over everything else. And that choice, made in a cold Tennessee cemetery by a 25-year-old officer who had everything to lose, and one faithful partner beside him, changed everything that came after. Sometimes, the most powerful truth in the room is the one that cannot speak. It can only bark and wait and refuse to walk away. If you believe that loyalty is one of God's most powerful gifts, that the faithful ones who stand beside us in the dark are placed there by something greater than coincidence, type AMN in the comments below. Share this story with someone who needs to be reminded that the truth always finds its way out, no matter how deep it is buried. Subscribe, so we can keep bringing you stories like this one, where courage comes in unexpected forms and love refuses to let the lie win. God bless every soul watching this. May He protect your home, your family, and the faithful ones who stand beside you.